I lost you there for a second. The internet must have gone down. Can you guys hear me okay now? Okay. So let me share my screen again. So we were talking about function and structure, right? And I mentioned earlier that when the structure breaks down, the function is going to become compromised. So when we break a bone, that's going to impair our muscular movement. When our heart tissue dies, that is going to impair the distribution of oxygen all over the body. Okay? So they work very closely together, anatomy and physiology. Now, let's take a look at the levels of organization in our body. And guys, this slide here is like a roadmap for the entire semester. This is how we're going to go from chapter to chapter, from chapter 1 all the way through chapter 16. Now, the most basic level of organization in our body is what we call the chemical level. Now, at the end of the day, we are nothing but atoms, right? We are atoms of oxygen and carbon and nitrogen and hydrogen. Next, the next level of organization, which is more complex, is what we call the molecular level. So now we're going to be talking about proteins. We're going to be talking about carbohydrates. We're going to be talking about fats. We're going to be talking about DNA and RNA. Then we get to the next level of organization, which is the cellular level. So now we're going to talk about cells and the components of cells and cell replication, mitosis, meiosis. We're going to talk about the mitochondria, the organelles. Next, we have the tissue level. And there are 4 different types of tissues in the body. We have nervous, we have epithelial, connective, and muscular. And those tissues make every structure and organ in our body. And then the next level of organization is what we call the organ level. So now we're going to discuss about the heart, the lungs, the brain, the kidneys, the liver, the pancreas, the spleen, etc. Now, when we group different organs together, now we have what we call the organ system level of organization. And there are a total of 11 organ system level. What are they? We have integumentary, skeletal, muscular, nervous, endocrine, cardiovascular, lymphatic, which also includes the immune system, respiratory, digestive, urinary, and reproductive. Now, take a wild guess what chapter 2 is going to cover. Chapter 2 covers the chemical level, is basic chemistry. What about chapter 3? Chapter 3 is going to be cells. And we're also going to talk about molecules and tissues. And then we're going to start going through the organ systems. We're going to start with the integumentary, the skin, and we're going to finish with the reproductive. So reproductive system is chapter 16, the very last chapter. All right? That is how we're going to conduct our semester. So let's go over each one of these organ systems here in a little bit of detail, just to introduce them. Then we're going to go into a lot more detail because we're going to cover each one of them in a chapter. So let's start with the integumentary system. Folks, I guarantee you that if I ask you to name 5 different organs, most of you are going to say heart, brain, lungs, liver, and kidneys. none of you will say the skin. Let me change that. The skin is an organ, and in fact is the biggest organ that we have, both in terms of surface area and in terms of weight. And it's a very important organ. What is the function of the skin? The main function of the skin is to separate our internal environment from the external environment. Now, the skin is not the only organ in the integumentary system. We also have our hair, the associated glands, what we call the cutaneous glands, fingernails, and toenails. Next, we have the skeletal system. And the skeletal system are composed of the bones, the cartilage, and the joints. And the skeletal system, guys, give the framework of our body. I want you guys to close your eyes for a second and imagine what would we look like without bones? We would be a blob of fat and muscle and skin with the big eyes. They're not even closing, they just stay open. We wouldn't look much like what we look today. The reason why we look the way that we look is because of our skeletal system. Next, we have the muscular system, and the muscular system includes the skeletal muscle and the tendons. What are tendons? Tendons are connective tissue that attach skeletal muscle to bone. That is different from a ligament. Ligaments attach bone to bone at a joint. Tendons attach muscle to bone. Okay? Now, the muscular system includes only one type of muscle, the skeletal muscle. But that is not the only type of muscle that we have. We have 2 other types of muscles. Can anybody tell me what they are? What are the other 2 muscles besides the skeletal? The skeletal is the only one that is voluntary, that we can control it. The other 2 are involuntary. What are they, guys? Say it again.
Smooth muscle?
A smooth muscle? Yes. One more.
Posterior?
No, that's a specific type of muscle. No.
Cardiac?
Cardiac. Yes, bingo. Our heart is a big ball of muscle. Okay? Now, it's not a skeletal muscle. It's not a smooth muscle. It's made of cardiac muscle. So we have a skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Where do we find the smooth muscle, guys? Everywhere in the body. Let me give you some examples. Our digestive tract, on the walls of the digestive tract, we have smooth muscle. Our iris, which is the colored part of our eye, that is made of smooth muscle. Surrounding our blood vessels, our arteries, on the walls of the arteries, we have smooth muscle. On the walls of the uterus, which is going to squeeze and push the big-headed baby out, there is smooth muscle. In the walls of the urinary bladder, we are going to find smooth muscle. All right? Next, we have the nervous system, and the nervous system includes the brain, spinal cord, and what we call the peripheral nerves. We have the endocrine system, and the endocrine system are the organs that are going to produce different hormones in our body. We have the cardiovascular system, and the cardiovascular system is actually 2 systems in one. Cardio is in relation to the heart. Vascular is in relation to the blood vessels. Now, we have 2 main types of blood vessels. We have the veins and we have the arteries. Can anybody tell me what is the difference between the 2? What is the difference between a vein and an artery?
The vein is the smaller part of the nervous system, and the arteries are the major arteries. So like a carotid artery and those things are the...
Be careful. Veins are not part of the nervous system, right?
Oh.
You just said nervous system. So they're part of the cardiovascular system. No, and that is not the
Vein
definition of a
is
vein and an artery.
vein is an oxygenated it doesn't contain the blood doesn't contain oxygen, and artery have oxygen, blood oxygen.
That is a very dangerous definition because that is not always the truth. Yes, it is true that for the systemic circulation, the veins are going to carry deoxygenated blood and the artery is going to carry oxygenated. But for the pulmonary circulation, which is the circulation of blood between the heart and the lungs, is the opposite. Veins are going to carry oxygenated blood, artery is going to carry deoxygenated blood. So we cannot use that definition. Have someone here? Arteries carry blood away from the heart and veins carry blood to the heart. Bingo! That is the appropriate definition. And write this down, guys. Arteries take blood away from the heart, sending this blood everywhere else in the body. Veins bring blood back to the heart. That is the appropriate definition of the two. Okay? All right, next we have the lymphatic system, which includes also the immune system. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the lymphatic and the immune system. We have the respiratory system that, of course, is very important in order for us to be able to get oxygen gas and exhale CO2. We have a digestive system, which we need the nutrients from the stuff that we eat to keep our cells alive. We have the urinary system, and the urinary system is going to filter the blood and remove the toxins from the blood and expel them out of the body through the urine. And then we have the male and the female reproductive systems, which is going to be the very last system that we talked about. And of course, that is essential for the survival of our species, right? Because all of a sudden, if none of us could have kids, eventually the human race would disappear. Now, even though we will study every system separately, folks, I want you to understand that the systems work together. All right? If one system is not working, it's going to affect the work of the other systems as well. So there is this coordination in the body among the different systems. In fact, several of the organs in our body, they belong to more than one system. Let me give you some examples. The pharynx, which is part of our throat, it belongs both to the respiratory and the digestive system. The ovaries in females, they belong both to the endocrine and the reproductive system. The testes in males, it belongs both to the endocrine and the reproductive system. Okay? We're going to see this overlap often within our body. Any questions, guys? All right. So let's watch this little video here that basically summarizes the different systems in our body and talk a little bit more about each one of them.
Hawaii is among the healthiest states, but healthcare is now less affordable and accessible.
The human body is a complex network of cells, tissues, and organs that together make life possible. 10 major systems are responsible for the body's functions. Skeletal.
For some reason, they don't include integumentary here. So we have 11, not 10.
Muscular. Cardiovascular. Nervous. Endocrine. Lymphatic. Respiratory. Digestive. Urinary. Reproductive. The skeletal, muscular, cardiovascular, and nervous systems in particular create an infrastructure that facilitates the other systems. The adult skeletal system is a framework of over 200 bones. They hold the body together, give it shape, and protect its organs and tissues. The skeleton also provides anchor points for the muscular system, which includes 3 types of muscles: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. They are found throughout the body and facilitate movement. Nestled within these muscles is the cardiovascular system, a pipeline that includes the heart, blood vessels, and the blood itself. Also called the circulatory system, the cardiovascular system delivers oxygen, white blood cells, hormones, and nutrients throughout the body. Lastly, the nervous system is a communication network of nerve cells that the body uses to transmit information and coordinate bodily functions. It's comprised of the brain, the hub of sensory and intellectual activity, the spinal cord, and the many cranial and spinal nerves that emanate from them. This infrastructure, created by neurons, blood, muscles, and bones, allows 3 other systems to regulate the body's environment: the endocrine, lymphatic, and urinary systems. The endocrine system is a series of glands that use information carried by the nervous system to help regulate the body's processes. Thanks to this neural connection, endocrine glands, such as the thyroid, are aware of the amount of hormones and other chemicals they need to produce. These chemicals are then distributed throughout the body by way of the cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular and nervous systems are also utilized by the lymphatic system, a collection of lymph nodes and vessels that help regulate the body's defenses. Also called the immune system, the lymphatic system uses neural pathways to transmit information about affected areas of the body and then sends out healing agents like white blood cells via the bloodstream. Another key regulatory system is the urinary system, which includes the kidneys, ureters, bladder, and urethra. The urinary or renal system maintains the body's electrolyte levels and filters waste from the blood. This waste is sent through the blood vessels into the kidneys and then expelled as urine. All of these systems require energy to function, and that's where the respiratory and digestive systems come in. The respiratory system is a group of passageways and organs that extracts life-giving oxygen from the air we breathe. Air enters the body through nasal cavities, travels down the throat, and is then transported to the lungs. The lungs extract oxygen for the body to use and then expel a carbon dioxide byproduct when we exhale. Energy can also come in the form of food. The digestive system is an approximately 30-foot series of organs that convert food into fuel. Food enters the system through the mouth, then moves into the esophagus, the stomach, and the intestines. Nutrients are absorbed into the body while solid waste is expelled through the anal canal, the end of the digestive tract. No matter the role, size, or shape of any of the body's systems, each began with the reproductive system. This system is responsible for creating life. The primary organs involved differ between the sexes, with ovaries, fallopian tubes, the uterus, and vagina found in women, and testes and a sperm channel found in men. Together, fertilization may occur, organ systems form, and then a child is born. Humans are complicated organisms, but when our 10 major organ systems are healthy, they ensure our well-being.
All right, guys, so there was a nice introduction to the different organ systems, which again, we're going to go over each one of them into a lot of details, okay? Because each one of them is going to be a chapter in this course. Now, why do we need all of the systems? Look, we need all of the systems because each one of them has a specific function, and they're all in coordination to help maintain homeostasis, okay? Now, what are some of the characteristics of the human body? What are the things that we need to have in order for us to exist, to be able to survive? Well, we need to have boundary in our body. What is our boundary, folks? Our skin. Like I said earlier, the skin separates the internal environment from the external environment. We need to be able to respond to the changes in our environment. We need to have what is called responsiveness. What does that mean? Let me give you some examples, okay? Our environment is constantly changing. And I'm not just talking about the weather outside. I'm also talking about our internal environment. Let me give you an example. What happens after we eat a meal, folks? Our blood sugar level is going to go up. We all know that, right? We eat something, blood sugar go up. Now, when the blood sugar go up, we are out of homeostasis. Why? Because the blood sugar level is higher than it should be. Now, are we going to stay with a high blood sugar level? Well, if we stay high blood sugar level, you're going to have diabetes. But what's going to happen is that our body is going to bring the sugar level in the blood back to the homeostatic level. So we can see here, we are constantly responding to the changes in the environment in order to maintain homeostasis. Okay? We need to be able to digest the food that we eat, break them down into smaller pieces, and be able to absorb those nutrients in order to maintain our metabolism. What is metabolism? But metabolism is the functions, the chemical reactions going on in our body, in our cells. We need to be able to excrete whatever we don't want anymore, all the toxic waste. And we're going to excrete them through our feces, and we're going to excrete them through the urines. And we grow and reproduce. Guys, if you ever wondered, if you ever are awake in the middle of the night wondering, what is the meaning of life? Well, let me answer the question for you once and for all. And I'm going to speak strictly in the biological sense of the question, not the philosophical sense, but the biological. In the biological sense, the meaning of life is to reproduce. Now, please don't go and say that I said in the class that if you don't have kids, your life is meaningless. No, I'm not saying that. Okay, please don't write that down on, rate my professor. No. What I'm saying is that in a biological sense, it doesn't matter if it is a human, a cat, a whale, a banana tree, or a virus. Every living thing in our planet wants to pass on their genes to the next generation in order to maintain the species. That is the goal. Okay, so reproduction is a very important aspect of maintaining our species. Okay? Now, let's talk again about homeostasis. Why is this so important? It is important because without homeostasis, we cannot function. Without equilibrium, we're going to die. If our body is out of homeostasis and it stays out of homeostasis, that is detrimental to our health. Okay? As I said earlier, after we eat a meal, we become hyperglycemic. Hyper means higher than, above. Glycemic means sugar. How are we going to respond? We're going to respond by secreting insulin, dropping the sugar level, and sending them into the cells. If you are starving, if you haven't eaten all day, I haven't had my lunch yet, I am pretty hungry, I am probably hypoglycemic right now, which means that our blood sugar level is low. Are we in homeostasis? No, we are out of homeostasis. How is our body going to respond? It's going to respond by having a secretion of a hormone called glucagon by the pancreas, and glucagon is going to send more glucose into the blood. Okay, again, we're constantly responding to the changes of the environment. Now, this responsiveness is possible because we have something called a feedback system in our body. What is this feedback system? And a feedback system is going to be this checks and balance that we have constantly checking how our environment. How is our environment? And within the feedback system, we're going to have three main components. We have the receptors, the control center, and we have the effectors. The receptors are the sensors in our body, guys. And we have sensors everywhere on the surface of our body, inside of our body. And let me give you some examples. We have sensors inside of our eye that sense light. We have sensors inside of our ears that perceive sound. We have sensors inside of our nose that perceive smell. We have sensors on our tongue that perceives taste. These are all different sensors. Now, those sensors, they're going to take that stimuli, whatever that stimuli might be, light, smell, sound, and it's going to send that information to the central nervous system, the brain. And the brain is going to decide what to do, how to respond to the changes in the environment. Now, the brain is like the big boss. The big boss doesn't actually do the physical work, the labor work, right? The brain is going to send that information to what we call the effectors, which are the skeletal muscle and the glands in our body, and they are actually going to respond. Okay? So these are the three basic components of a feedback system. Now, there are two main types of feedback systems. There's a group called the negative feedback system and another group called the positive feedback system. I love asking questions about this in the exam. You need to understand the difference between the negative and a positive feedback system. What is a negative feedback system? Guys, in a negative feedback system, everybody look up here, please. In a negative feedback system, the stimulus is going in the opposite direction as the response. Let me give you an example. What happens when we walk outside and it's very hot outside? Our body is going to overheat, right? How do we respond? We respond by activating the sudoriferous glands, and they are going to produce sweat, and the sweat is going to go to the surface of our skin, and when the sun evaporates the sweat, it's going to cool us down through a process that is called evaporative cooling. So it's going to cool us down. That's why we sweat. So here is a perfect example of a negative feedback system. What was the stimulus, guys? An increase in the temperature of the body. What was the response? Bringing the temperature back to the homeostatic level. Most of the feedback system in our body, they belong to the negative feedback system. Okay? Now, what about the positive feedback system? Well, if the negative feedback system, the stimulus and the response are going in the opposite directions, what about in a positive? They are going in the same direction. So now the stimulus and the response are moving in the same direction. Let me give you a great example. When a woman is ready to give birth, this baby is going to start, the head of the baby is going to start pushing against the cervix. And the uterus is going to start to contract, right? The uterine wall. That is going to activate the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is going to secrete a hormone called oxytocin. Guys, oxytocin will increase uterine contraction. So now it's going to make the contraction of the uterus stronger, and they're going to come in a shorter interval. What are they doing? They are helping with the process of delivering the baby. So what was the stimulus? The stimulus was initiation of the birthing. What was the response? Let's make it stronger. Let's accelerate that response. Look, can you imagine if giving birth was a negative feedback system? That baby would never come out. Okay, we want the baby to come out. So this is why he's going to push it along to make sure that the baby is going to come out. Okay. All right, guys, moving on. We only have 5 minutes here, and that's okay. I want to get started on the language of anatomy. And one of the things I want to talk about what we call the standard or universal anatomical position. What is this? The standard universal position, guys, is when an individual is standing upright, the feet is parallel on the ground, the arms are to the side of the body, and the hands are open and facing forward, just like this. Not closed, not facing backwards, facing forward. That's what we call a standard anatomical position. Now, when we look at an object like a human being, we are not a flat, picture or a drawing on a piece of paper or a screen. No, we are three-dimensional. So we can look at a human body in different views, different aspects. If I look at this individual here from the front, like what we have right now, guys, this is what we call the anterior view or the anterior aspect. If I'm looking at this body from the back, this is what we call the posterior view or the posterior aspect. If I'm looking from the top, this is what we call the superior view or the superior aspect. If I'm looking from the bottom, this is what we call the inferior view. And if I'm looking from the side, this is what we call the lateral view. Now we have two different laterals. We have the left lateral view and we have the right lateral view. Okay, so these are the different aspects, the different views in which we can look at a body or an organ. Now, the standard anatomical position is not the only position that we can place a body. We can also place in what we call the supine or a prone position. In a supine position, that individual is lying on his back, the face is pointing up. In a prone position, that individual is lying on his belly, and the face is pointing down. Okay? Any questions, guys? All right, I'm going to stop right here. That's all the time that we have for today. We are going to finish chapter 1 on Thursday. And the quiz for chapter 1 is going to open on Thursday and is going to be due Sunday night by 11 p.m. Okay? Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys on Thursday. Thank you.